Hey, it's DrRic. Today's unboxing is on Turmeric Spice. The spice that we put in our food sources, I haven't opened this yet, but that's turmeric, and just happened to find this at Jewel-Osco. So the spice that we use in food has been studied at least since the 2006. Janet Funk, this is an awesome scientist. She works with the University of Arizona, my home base for Integrative Medicine Fellowship. That's when I did the Andy Weil Fellowship on learning about food, learning about calming practice, meditative practice, learning about exercise has accelerant to healthy lifestyle. So Janet Funk did this study back in 2006, and it's been quoted multiple times, finding that turmeric back then did decrease symptoms in rheumatoid arthritis or patients with rheumatoid arthritis, and specifically a couple of different compounds in the body, but one called NF-kappa B. And if you have rheumatoid arthritis, you know how difficult it is to get by the day, start your day because of joint pain. Well, turmeric, the spice, is an ancient spice out of India, and a lot of Indian dishes are heavy with turmeric. Now, we usually don't have that many spices in the United States with the typical American palate, but I've had people ask questions. So this is going to be an unboxing, but it's also going to be a tutorials of somewhat. So I don't know if I can really unbox this. I might get all over the place, but oh, okay, easy enough. So that's a typical, that smells good. This is a typical beautiful color of turmeric, and the powder, it can stain. In fact, back in the 90s, whenever I had an Indian couple come in, if they were coming in for pain or muscle discomfort or an injury, usually they'd be painting the area. It would come in, they'd come in with the same color, that orange yellowish color all over the body. And it works as a salve, supposedly, in the culture to decrease inflammation. So I guess that's where the studies came from, is does this spice actually help? And there were positive results. The problem is that with trying to figure out how cultures will and their use of certain spices and foods will translate to science is somewhat difficult. But now that with the last at least 13 years since Funk put her information out, we've had a plethora of different, that's the beauty of the internet, plethora of different NIH small studies, animal mostly, as far as how the anti-inflammatory effects of curcumin, that's the active ingredient turmeric, would help. And a lot of the studies are small. Most of the studies are in vitro. In vitro means that it's in a lab. Even if it's with rats, which usually, unfortunately for you guys that are PETA sensitive, the rats have to go through a sacrifice, but we find things to help humanity. And I don't want to get into that, but so the studies in the lab show that there is great possibilities for the active ingredient to do things like stimulate NF-kappa B. Or at least to calm down NF-kappa B. And if you calm that down, you can calm down the expression not only of rheumatoid arthritis and pain to the joints, but also other things like breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, even inflammation related to gut autoimmune disease. So this is a great possibility to help. The one thing, though, that comes out as being important to understand is that usually the studies were done on, comparative studies were done on people who'd used turmeric in their spices and their food practice for a long time, a lifetime. And if you're just getting the disease process and trying to put it in, I think there's value in adding it, at least as far as increasing your fluency of using spice, but you have to use it at great lengths. So that's where the beauty of studies have come in. I'm going to just pull this out. Again, this is an unboxing, but it's more of a tutorial. It's a mixture of tutorials. So turmeric is the root, and that's how it looks. I even have a tea that I have that has turmeric in it. I was introduced to turmeric tea by a fellow who I roomed with when at the fellowship in Arizona from Okinawa. And the turmeric, it's often, you can't find it anywhere, but turmeric tea is great, just for the taste. So, turmeric, the root, you can find it in the vegetable section, just next to the ginger area. So it's a root, looks like ginger. In fact, it's in the same family, I believe. So turmeric root is what we're talking about. The active ingredient is curcumin. Curcuminoids are what's studied in a lot of these in vitro studies, the active isolated ingredient. But so the extract and or the oil is the active isolate of the what is thought the most important compound inside the turmeric root. Now there's other things in the turmeric root if you eat the root, but that one, just for the sake of this discussion, is important. Now the question is, when you eat the root, does it get into the stomach? And I've also had other people asking, do you have to have black pepper? And yes, when you add black pepper to turmeric, it decreases the breakdown in the gut. The gut is very good, if it's functioning properly, to break things down. You break things down and then you get the active ingredient and or the basic building block, and it gets through the lining of the small intestine and gets into the bloodstream. The problem with the active ingredient, curcumin, is that it doesn't last that long. There are clinical instabilities with the active ingredient, absorption-wise. This is a nice study, at least not study, but this is a nice evaluation of curcumin. And bioavailability is always a problem. So if you have black pepper added to your turmeric, if you're cooking, you might be able to decrease the breakdown in the lining or in the small intestine, so it gets absorbed, hopefully increases possibility of absorption into the bloodstream. Problem is sometimes using piperine or black pepper can screw up a couple other things like iron absorption, so you have to be careful. So when you specifically want to use this instead of a capsule, because the capsules are expensive, you might want to get to maximum effective dose. So if we're going to decrease inflammation, the studies that were done on inflammation, like Janet's stuff, or the other studies, usually would center on positive effects at about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of turmeric or the curcumin per day. Just leave it at that. 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day. So if you can get that amount of curcumin into your food source, cool. And then if you get a matching amount of black pepper so that the turmeric doesn't get broken down, cool. Now let's break it down to how much, because some people can't afford I like Doctor's Best because it was reviewed by Consumer Labs. I used to love Gaia brand, Turmeric Supreme. But according to Consumer Labs, which is an independent company, they test things off the shelf. And before they publish their information, they get a second independent company to verify the test results. I think they use gas chromatography. And then they publish. And Gaia brand had a couple of different labels. It used to be my favorite, but because they didn't make the they didn't make the approval state, Consumer Labs give them a thumbs down. And if you belong to Consumer Labs, you'll see the rebuttal. There's a lawyer from Gaia brand that sent, it sounded like a threatening letter to Consumer Labs to cease and desist the statement that the Turmeric Supreme was bad. Again, for me, it used to work as far as pain control, inflammation control, fibromyalgia control. But since the dose and the labeling was in question, I decided to switch over to Doctor's Best. And that's been given a thumbs up. So it's kind of cool if you read the Consumer Labs argument and how they are not retracting the fact that they gave it a thumbs down. But either way, so if we get into just using this because it's too expensive to get the capsules, here's what we have to shoot for. Again, if you have to shoot for 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of curcumin per day in your bloodstream, you've got to take in a massive amount of the powder. So for those of you who cook, if you can do it, if you want to get 120 milligrams of curcumin in your bloodstream, you've got to use a teaspoon of turmeric powder and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Now, when I might, if I was making, say, an egg for my son or rice. I might dash a little bit of garlic powder, and if I wanted to try to fool my son and give him a little turmeric for the anti-inflammatory effect, at least a sniff of it, that's just a dash. Imagine you have to use a full teaspoon in one dish and you have to finish off the dish. That alone will be a deal breaker for my son because it changes around the taste of your dish. And so if you do 1 teaspoon of this, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, you might be successful in getting 120 milligrams into your bloodstream that day. Remember, the studies that were done on all these other things, they always shot for about an average of 1,000 to 2,000 to get effective levels. So if you do 1 teaspoon of this, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, you'll have 120. So you really, it might not get into your bloodstream enough unless you take 10 teaspoons of this. 10 teaspoons of this and 1/4 teaspoon times 10 of this in your dish will get you to therapeutic levels. And I just think that's a deal breaker. So if you do this instead of the capsule, you're shortcutting your effectiveness. So I realize that some people follow a whole food, mostly plant-based diet, and they don't want to take supplements, save money. But if you wanted to get the most bang for your buck, especially following the studies, although the studies are very small, but they're good, science is good, you've got to just increase the crap out of this. And I think it's a deal breaker. Probably knock all the iron out, and if you're taking a prescription medicine, it'll screw up the absorption of the prescription medicine as well. So the idea, so that's it as far as the powder. If you're going to try to shoot for a supplement, again, the supplements try to get something that gives you about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day. So how you break it down into the supplement, if you want to read the label on the supplement, you've got to have, it's called piperine. Black pepper, the active ingredient is called piperine. Black pepper, or piperine and curcumin have to be at a ratio of about 5 of the piperine to 500 of the curcumin. And again, if you shoot for 1 serving, read the label, 1 serving that might be equal to that. I think if you get 1 serving twice a day or 1 serving 3 times a day, that will put you in the ballpark of 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of curcumin in your bloodstream to hopefully do the magic that Janet Funk came up with as far as NF-kappa B, decreasing inflammatory markers in the bloodstream. So that's the idea is, and by the way, if you do the old-fashioned way and want to get in whatever I said as far as the total amount, total teaspoons, it would be better if you did it with a high-fat or a high-oil kind of diet, because that also stabilizes and gets it through the lining of the small intestine. And that'll bring me to my next point. There's new formulations. I don't have them here, but novel studies have come up with interesting absorption. So I think, well, there's a couple of these that showed the questionable or novel studies of using a curcumin that's been lipophilic, or I just made that up. If you make the curcumin lipophilic, it might get into the lining faster and it might stay in its stable form. So another patient of mine, a wife, had said, what kind of curcumin do you suggest? And I was thinking, I didn't know there are several types, but she was talking about how it's absorbed. And if you just take the curcumin, active ingredient in powder form, in capsule form, concentrated, versus this powder, which isn't broken down, again, you know how much to shoot for, I just discussed it here. But if you take it, the theory is if you take it in lipophilic, where the company has bound it to something that will keep it stable in the bloodstream, lipophilic, it theoretically gets into the system easier, and in the bloodstream, if it's lipophilic, that's called nano-emulsion. When you make the compound stable enough to get in the bloodstream, it doesn't get attacked, it doesn't break down as fast, it can cross the blood-brain barrier, in theory. But the problem with the nano-emulsions, if you ask me, that's a new product. My patient's wife had suggested, she thought that the information is good. I couldn't find any online. And usually when there's something new online, it's going to jack up the price. And already if you go at Doctor's Best, like I suggest, to get to that dose or that magic sweet spot of 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams, you got to pay at least 20 to 30 bucks. And I thought it was worth it, but I'll only use it when my fibro kicks in or when I have a tough workout day or when I get injured, knock on wood. But then I'll put it away and save it because it's so expensive. So if you're trying to get into the nano-emulsion part and it's more expensive, it makes sense that it might stay stable in the bloodstream till it gets to the area you want to get to, whether it's Alzheimer's disease and the brain, whether it's the joint and RA, whether it's a cancer spot, or whether it's just osteoarthritis or osteoporosis in the bone. If you have it in nano-emulsion blend, then it might get there. In theory, that's in vitro. That's studying not in a human, but in either a lab someplace. So the problem is, even with the lipophilic or nano-emulsion technique, according to the journal, it only increased absorption a little more. So I don't know if it'll be worth it. And to translate the information from science into how it would work, you have to be comfortable with kind of assuming or extrapolating that if it worked with rats, it should work in humans. We don't know. Rats have a totally different gut compared to a human. The microbiome is different. But again, that's the best we can do until you do live human studies. And I guess that's not too bad, but again, Janet Funk did it way back in the 2006, and a lot of the newer studies are all based on the 2006 study that she came out with. However, the objective is, again, to get that into the stream. So whether you do a massive amount of the powder, or if you do the capsule in concentrated amounts, we have to get into the bloodstream. Once it gets into the bloodstream, then NF-kappa B will be knocked into submission, and you should decrease your inflammation, whether it's Alzheimer's, joint arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, or even cancer. I think there's new studies showing how it might affect cancer and the replication of the cancer cells. And just the bottom line is inflammation. So, bottom line, aside from the inflammation. So in the end, I think it's nice to have turmeric. In the end, it's so awesome to have access to all these studies that we can find on the internet as far as backing up science and using data to figure out. And that's what integrative medicine is. We use data to make proper decisions on how we change natural things. Now, I'm sorry if I got into the weeds with all this as far as the science, but it's important. And patients will sometimes grab onto lipophilic and pay the 40 bucks a month. I can't afford that. If I can't afford it, my patients, I'm going to assume my patient can't afford it. That's got to be a lifetime. It's got to be a lifetime of use. Remember, the studies with India, assuming India's low Alzheimer's rate is because of the way they cook or the way they practice yoga. And not that every Indian patient I have does either of the two, but again, the population studies are cool. Translating population studies into my patients that come in one at a time, I have to have data. I have to have a way to prove this or come up with how the lifestyle has to be. Now, if you can have decreased inflammation with mostly whole food plant-based diet and exercise and calming practice to decrease the inflammation of the brain and great sleep, and so if you take all that stuff, you'll be bulletproof. If we add a little bit of this, it might just help. If you do it in proper form, it might just help. So hopefully this isn't too technical, but I tried to make it as simplistic as possible. And I don't want you to spend too much money, but do the research. Consumer Lab is nice. They have a lot of great Q&A. It's only like $3 a month to support them. And you might be able to get further information if you do have it. Otherwise, hopefully this gives you some direction. Put some comments down below on what you would want to see or want to hear. If you have any ideas of how you get the turmeric in or the curcumin in. I have no affiliation with any supplement companies. I just want to do the best thing for you guys. So again, try to make it a 3-time-a-day thing, whether it's taking a boatload of this stuff or doing the capsules. Find your way. Research the company, call the company if you have any questions, and keep on feeding me questions so I can break it down for you in English.